Joanna, do I have to click on something else?
No, we're just gonna give a couple of minutes. Dawn is joining, so once she joins, we'll start. I think we should go ahead, right? Dawn, do you want to kick this off? Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining this APDVS webinar. We have Dr. Dawn Coleman, who is the president of APDVS. Give us a few words before we start.
Thank you, Dr. Etkin, and to everybody just for being here this evening to learn from people who have real content expertise and a pretty heavy background in supporting the evolution of what I think is going to be a really important curricular addition for our respective training programs. I simply want to say thank you to Dr. Etkin and the entire committee that's been working on this. It's work that really started early in my tenure with the APDVS, and it's nice to see it moving forward now. I think especially with some delays that were incurred during COVID, getting this project back on track is really, really important. I'll just say that the concept, I think, even predates my arrival to training program leadership, and I can think of really early exposures to this through the fundamentals course that Dr. Shahan has hosted kind of year after year in New Orleans. And some of my strongest friendships and mentor matches and other educational enthusiasms have stemmed from this work, if we're being very honest. So I couldn't be more excited to see it move forward under Dr. Etkin's leadership and her team. And I know that we've got a lot of really versed people who will be speaking this evening, and I hope that we're able to share kind of some guidance and helpful hints on how to integrate this opportunity into your training programs. I know we're really excited to use it at Duke, and I'm super excited to learn from everybody this evening. So huge thanks, welcome, and let's dig in.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman, for this introduction of this important topic. So we were going to discuss the how to integrate fundamentals of vascular surgery curriculum in your training program. So I'm a chair of the APDVS curriculum committee, while and we're charged this year to kind of help to lead this project forward. However, I have not as much experience with this curriculum as many people on this panel, and I'm grateful for the speakers that join us tonight who's been involved in this curriculum since its inception, and this is sort of a baby, and I'm just trying to help here. And I also wanted to thank the support staff for the APDVS, Joanna and Mo, who really put a lot of hard work with putting this together. As you guys listen to this presentations and discussions, please put all your questions in the chat and we'll try to address them. Without further ado, I will introduce our first speaker, Kristen Menor. She was leading this committee for the last 2 years, and she did a lot of work moving this project along. She's currently at Loma Linda University, and she's in APD, and she will go over the materials that you should have all received for the 4 skills stations that we're testing in this curriculum. Just to confirm, these were distributed to you. Part of it distributed at last APDVS meeting, and then some of them part of the materials were shipped to you by Gore directly. And so far, these materials has only been distributed to the integrated programs and not fellowships. Thank you, Kristen, for being here.
Yeah, for sure. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Thank you, Dr. Etkin. Yeah, I was fortunate enough to be a part of the kind of implementation process of this. Definitely not, and you're going to hear from some of kind of the originators of a lot of these skills a little bit later, but just to kind of get us on the same page as far as vocabulary and what we're actually talking about, I thought I'd go over to start with what is in the kit, what the skills are, and then maybe get a little bit of started on how to kind of make it happen in your program. So to start out with, I should have done like an unboxing video like the kids do these days, but this is kind of to go over what you'll get in your kit. To start out with just basics, there's 3 tasks that make up the fundamentals of vascular surgery. This is the open curriculum. The idea is eventually there'll be an endo curriculum, but that's down the road. And so these skills are kind of everything boiled down into these 3 kind of basic techniques that when you master these, you can kind of put them together in lots of different ways and form the fundamentals of open vascular surgery. So the first one, these are the sheets that are in your box. So this should be right in there if you already got them. They're also available on our website too, on the APDVS website, I believe. But it kind of goes through the 3 different tasks: the end-to-side anastomosis, the patch angioplasty, and the clock face suturing, which is kind of like precision suturing. If anybody went through the fundamentals of laparoscopic surgery, this kind of format will look a little bit familiar because it just lists all of the equipment that's needed, and then the key steps of the procedure that have been standardized over lots of testing. And again, some of our panelists and speakers can kind of talk about the rigorous testing that it's been through to kind of develop, you know, how big the anastomosis should be, or how what the diameter of the circle on the clock face suturing is, to just make it out of reach for a needle and make you actually have to know where your needle is going to come out. And so this is the basics, the steps. If you'll notice, there are little QR codes next to each of the videos, and those link to videos of, or next to each picture, those link to videos of an expert doing these procedures so that trainees can watch them and see what exactly is being asked of them. There's also a time limit, and this ultimately proved to be the biggest kind of distinguishing or discriminating factor in performing these skills, whether or not you can suture around a clock face in 20 minutes or in 5 minutes, really does kind of suss out whether or not these trainees are getting the fundamentals. So this is the first thing you'll see in kind of the overview. You'll also have in your kit a scoring sheet. Again, this should be on the website too, but maybe keep one and make a bunch of photocopies. And this also has been developed over lots of iterations. The last one we met with the American Board of Surgery test psychometrician to make sure that this kind of holds up, because the ultimate goal is that this will be required for for the sitting for the boards for vascular surgery trainees. So this is the skills scoring sheet. You'll see on the top, there's actually the same score sheet used for all 3 of the skills stations. And so this is kind of a guideline, what you as the program leadership will be using to assess your trainees. With some more formative feedback at the top, you'll see that there are pretty particular anchors to each of these ratings. And then there are spaces that give you as the program director, program leadership, leeway to kind of provide your own feedback, or maybe that middle ground where they're almost there but not quite. So it leaves a little bit up to your judgment. And then at the bottom, there's kind of a summative rating that you would give them that would correlate to what they would see before they sit for their boards if they were to pass it before they get there. So those are kind of those things. Also in the kit, these are the fun parts you'll find. This acrylic tube with alligator clips. You can see it in the picture here. This is from Dr. Sheehan's Fundamentals of Vascular Surgery course in New Orleans, with the kind of alligator clips that go through these holes in this acrylic tube where you put the clock face model in there so that it simulates sewing down in, a cavity of some sort. You'll find suture boards to clip your graft to for an end-to-side anastomosis or patch angioplasty. You'll find a stamp both for the clock face and for the hash marks for patch angioplasty, and an ink pad. And then you'll also find 1/4-inch foam sheets. This is to simulate actually PTFE sheets. And then additionally, you'll find your grading sheets and your skills outlines. The things that aren't in the kit would be kind of this hopefully standard things that you can get in a skills lab. So, forceps and needle drivers, maybe some graft material, although I'll tell you in a second that there's some ways to get around that. And then sutures, scissors, things like that. But these are kind of the things that are hard to replicate and that will make or break the skill for the trainees. So that should all be in your box that hopefully most of you got. And like Dr. Atkins said, if you didn't, maybe reach out to the APDVS, Joanna or Mo, and we can figure out what happened there, or how to get you some supplies. Now, this kind of begs the question, there's lots of ways to implement it, and we'll be talking about that later, but at some point you're going to run out of grading sheets, or you're going to run out of foam sheets, or your suture board's going to break or something like that. So maybe some DIY supplies. This was our first implementation of the Fundamentals of Vascular at my training program. Actually, we did it in conjunction with the general surgery residents. And set everything up. And because we wanted more, because the general surgery residents were participating, we actually kind of preemptively did some of these DIY, made some of these DIY supplies. And so you can see on the left, this is an acrylic tube that our simulation lab manager ordered on Amazon. I don't know if I'm allowed to mention brand names. An online retailer, but you can see he got these little alligator clips that are kind of the same. He actually drilled several layers of holes in it, so I had the interns start at the top layer to make it a little bit easier for them, and then as the PGY levels kind of made it a little bit more difficult. But that's something that you can definitely get online. He 3D printed this base because it was kind of sliding all over the place. And so he figured out, I'm sure there's lots of other ways to do that too. The foam sheets are actually from the craft store. They're 1/4-inch foam sheets. So you can use those if you want to make some more, or if your trainees want to practice, you can use that for the clock face. And actually, as you can see on the right of the screen, we actually use them for the patch angioplasty too. This is one of my third-year general surgery residents, and she's looking to go into vascular, and she's amazing. So if anybody sees her in the future, she's great. She only did one side of that patch angioplasty, so if you're looking at it critically, she did the good side. And then I don't know if you can see there on the table, I didn't take a great picture of it, but we actually use these long balloons, the kind that you make balloon animals out of, for an end to side anastomosis. It's actually trickier to sew on them than it is on PTFE, but if you need that. And then for the stamps, we source them from Etsy or any online, again, online retailer. And I can get you the dimensions and things like that if you that's a direction that you want to go. But just kind of an intro to a vocabulary of and you know, you spent a good amount of time trying to get all of this in your hands. And now I'll give it back to you, Dr. Atkin, to talk about kind of implementation and next steps for that. But yeah, that's basically the kit.
Thank you, Dr. Manoa. This was a great overview. I hope all of you guys already received the supplies. If you have any issues, please reach out to Joanna Branson, and I'm gonna ask her to put her email on the chat in case you need it, and she might try to help you get the kits if you don't have the supplies. Next, we have Dr. Mal Shaheen, who was Chair of Vascular Surgery at LSU. I'm sure most of you on this call know him. But this project is really his baby. He started it many years ago, and he will give us an overview of how and why this project started and what is the data behind it. Thank you, Dr. Shaheen, for joining us.
Thank you. I am trying to share my screen. There we go. Sorry, it's a little haywire here. I'm not sure why it's doing this. Give me 1 second. There we are. All right. So this wasn't just my idea. I'm just the one who gets blamed for it. But there's some of the other panelists here have been with me a long time trying to do it. And it's such a relief to hear younger people like Kristen talking about this, because Jason and I are aging out of this pretty quickly. So this did start quite some time ago. And I think our ideas and our goals have changed over time as we kind of realized what simulation can and can't do for vascular surgery. You know, us older people, we came up at a time where we were told, oh, you know, the simulation stuff is garbage and what a waste of time, and I can teach my trainees myself. And so quite a lot of encouragement we got from our past generation. But anyway, so we sat down 2012 to kind of figure out, you know, what are the fundamental skills of vascular surgery and how we're going to make models to kind of translate all of that. So these are the actual, I think it was John Ide who was up at the dry erase board kind of writing all these things down. And what we found is for endo, it became fairly straightforward, like what the basic skills are. But for open surgery, you know, the FLS people had kind of really broken down. I'm sure you've all seen the FLS models really broken down, almost like baseball, where baseball can be separated: see the ball, hit the ball, catch the ball. And those are the fundamental skills of baseball. But vascular surgery, it occurred to us, is more like basketball, where it's a lot of movements that when taken out of context don't really mean anything. So you cannot break down vascular surgery, at least in our opinion, too far, or it kind of loses that translatability to the OR. So that's why a lot of our models have so-called face validity. They look like what you would do in the OR. And because when we broke it down further than that, it stopped adding value. So, and then the other big thing is, you know, we can't simulate the hard stuff, right? We can't simulate a thoracoabdominal exposure there unless you have access to, you know, fresh frozen cadavers, which cost about $3,000 to $7,000 each. You're not going to be able to simulate this stuff. So what can we simulate and what can be translatable to the OR became kind of our obsession. And so what we decided is the suturing part of vascular surgery can be simulated pretty easily, and can be translated to the OR, so that when your trainees are there, they've learned this, they've pretty much mastered it, and then you can teach them the hard stuff about vascular surgery and have more time to do that. So Kristen kind of showed you this stuff. So it's all has very basic face validity. It's all test independent skills, but they all can be combined to, you know, the basic things that we think a vascular surgeon needs to know how to do: an enticide anastomosis, right? A patch angioplasty. Believe it or not, patch angioplasty adds a little bit that the enticide doesn't. Has a lot teaching about spatial arrangements and how to kind of properly space your suture, where you can get away with it with an enticide, but you really can't get away with poor spacing on a patch. And some of these are all from the videos, and you can see, you can grade the end product where they don't evert the edges. You know, there's a lot that goes into this without just looking at the suturing and the spacing, you know, how they use their assistant, how they evert their edges. These are all things that you can grade them either while they're doing it or afterwards. And, you know, if you take a novice, you'll get something that looks like this. So there's a lot that can be differentiated here with these. And then the final one is the clock face. The clock face model is meant to be used with an SH. And so the stamp is spaced such that if you hold the SH needle in the appropriate part, probably about 70% back on the needle, not rather than in the halfway point, and kind of turn your wrist exactly as you should with an SH needle, it will automatically hit the outer rim of that circle almost exactly. And so this evolved over the years. This is not the first version of it. I think it was Mark Matos who pointed out my first version was garbage. I don't know if he said garbage, but it was garbage. And so we had to resize it and reshape it. And now we have the newer model, which hopefully all of you have, and looks like that. And so this is the most traditional of the fundamentals things, which we can measure in time, error, and accuracy. So this has been extensively studied. It's the most heavily studied simulation kits in vascular surgery. So the formal trial was 313 trainees, and you can see all different levels here. And so we found a good correlation with their score and with their experience, whether that's in terms of time or actually cases, with their actually own internal confidence in performing these skills as well. So heavily validated over, you know, a great amount of time. And here you can see its correlation of the enticide scoring versus the time spent. And as you get, you know, more experience, you get better at it. But that wasn't what excited me. What excited me is this kind of triangular shape here. And what this means is that these people over here on the x-axis who have very little experience can actually master this skill. And so that meant to me, if we get this in the hands of people early in their career, we can actually move this learning curve. And so over time, I've actually taken medical students, and with, you know, fairly intensive tutoring and instruction, they can pass these skills. So there's no reason for us to have, you know, second, third, or fourth year even integrated residents who can't pass it, when we just know that, you know, if you put it in their hands, if you teach them it, that they will be able to master it at a much younger age. And then again, when they get in the OR, they'll have those skills already. So you can kind of start teaching them the harder stuff. And so again, this is when we did the national trial, and we found that a third year integrated resident only had about a 40% chance. Sorry, my dog's going nuts. 40% chance of passing this. And so the whole goal is to move that learning curve to the left so they can pass this much earlier in their career. And that's the appropriate use. We've got other things. We've worked with a bunch of engineers, and we're trying to automate all of this and make it easier. But, you know, we've been working at it for a long time, and we think it's, you know, appropriate that we start nationally and get feedback from all of you. You know, Kristen gave out Joanna's email, but rather than we all kind of email bomb Joanna, I think that, you know, I'll put a plug out for SVS Connect. I think that's the appropriate forum for us to kind of address this. I check it, you know, I get the emails every day. So if I see people have a question that I can answer, I'm certainly happy to help you there. But I think if we all kind of talk through the issues we're having on the APDVS format, SVS Connect, that would be great. And we can kind of work through this together. You don't want to hear about burnout. That's a different talk. I'm gonna stop sharing and hand it back over to Yana now.
Thanks, Mel. This was great, and the data is convincing. So, and I hope people on this webinar who hear it later will be convinced to start using it. We had a question about endovascular skills, and I know this is a kind of a big topic to discuss. And I know you mentioned briefly in your last slide, but what do you think long term? Do you see us integrating an endovascular skills into this?
So we have one. There's a lot of so I don't want to get too much into it. There's some financial issues. If you have a Symbionix though at your institution and you want it, I can get it to you as long as your agreement with Symbionix is up to date. I think they, you have to pay some amount of money so they kind of keep your software updated. If you have an updated contract with Symbionix and you want the endovascular, I can get it to you. We built so we didn't want to just marry Symbionix, so we actually built an on-table kind of construction thing. But every time we move it anywhere, it breaks. So we kind of, I don't know, that was Dr. Bismuth's baby. So I don't think he's on here, but Jean was we are still very interested. I kind of always felt that the open models were more useful, but then I realized in talking to Kelly Brown just the other day that the endovascular is probably very useful for fellows because they come with the open skill, but they don't come with the endo. And I had not really thought of it that way. So I have a renewed interest now, but I don't want to put too much on APDVS's plate. So we'll get the open going, especially with the integrated programs, and let me see if I can figure out a way to get the endo in more people's hands. But like I said, if you do have a Symbionix device and you have an upgraded agreement with them, I can get you the software, I think for free, if you want to start trying that as well.
Thank you. So we're gonna move on to a more of a panel discussion style, where we're gonna go over how to integrate the curriculum. We hear from some people who already used this curriculum for a while. So I have Dr. Jason Lee, who's the Chief of Vascular Surgery at Stanford. He's been involved in this from the beginning with Mal. We also have Dr. Paul DeMuster, who is the Vice Chair of this curriculum committee and PD at University of Wisconsin. He's also been part of original pilot trial. Dr. Faisal Aziz, who is the Chief of Vascular Surgery at Penn State and also been part of the original pilot program. And we have Dr. Jeffrey Silpe, who's an APD at program I'm at Northwell, who's actually, we just started integrating it. So I thought it's good to include him to see how new people are able to use it. And so I think we're gonna start by going around and giving everybody a couple of minutes to share how they did it and what really one or two things that they thought worked the best, and then what are things that really didn't work. So I guess we'll start with you, Dr. Lee.
Great. Well, I want to really sort of congratulate Dawn for inspiring the committee to put this webinar together. I think Mal and I have spent so much time on it, we kind of forget and lose perspective on it. I'm going to share my screen. I've got a couple of slides here. Let's see. Okay. So we started with the crew that Mal had talked about, and really we have to publicly always thank Jean and Murray and Claudie and David and John, who really had helped Mal and I from the outset. It was a team effort since about 2009, actually, when Mal and I first met about it. This is my only slide. What I wanted to kind of explain was what we've already done at Stanford, and this was already happening in parallel. Every several times a year, meeting for boot camp in Methodist Houston, for introduction to academic vascular surgery in Tampa, in Murray's shop, and then at Fundamentals of Vascular in New Orleans, we were able to practice using and create the validation that Mal just spoke about. After we had a little bit of the crazy idea that we thought this wouldn't really launch after some advice from some of the folks at FLS and FES, Fundamentals of Endoscopic Surgery, as well as FRS, Fundamentals of Robotic Surgery, that have all been kind of in the queue. To us, we realized FLS and FES had to take off, meaning the programs were forced to use it as soon as the American Board of Surgery required it. So Mal, Jean-Marie, and I had the idea when we were not on the board, the VSB, to pitch it to the VSB and kind of got a preliminary, okay, sounds like you guys are on the right track. Let's go ahead and give you a kind of conditional approval that we're going to recommend that it be something that is required to sit for your boards. I think that was, we might have gotten out in front of it before we were ready to lay it out. And then I think many people on this panel and on the call probably remember some of the early meetings in 18 and 19 as we were talking about it, saying it's coming. The board generally approved it. And so the APDVS better get around it. And then obviously the pandemic happened. So I think this is definitely something that Mal and I will blame on COVID for setting us back a little bit. Fast forward 5 years, then obviously several of us wound up on the VSB. And now we're faced with the idea of trying to implement something that we had hoped by now would be just into our curriculum. So I just wanted to say what we've been doing. Fortunately, since 2018, I had buy-in from our general surgery program director, Mark Melcher, is a transplant surgeon. I told him we were developing this. I knew that at that time we only had 1 or 2, graduates a year, and so it was harder to set up a session often where there's only like 2 or 3 learners. So I got buy-in from general surgery that we would use their skills protected time, which is 9 to 11 a.m. every Tuesday. And I volunteered to basically sign up every other month to run vascular suturing from 9 to 11, 6 times a year. And I knew I would use that time to kind of use the videos that Mal developed, the ones that are at the course, use all the 3 skill sets, the endoside, the patch, and the clock face. And then basically each calendar year in August, October, and December, I do training, which is just the residents show up. And the good thing about using the general surgery skills time is that is a department agreed upon time that's protected. So at those 3 sessions early on the year, because none of us like to show up to do teaching if only 2 or 3 people are going to show up. But when a dozen or so residents show up to suture, you're almost guilted into being pretty engaged. And then you as a faculty member spend your time doing it. So one of my big lessons is you got to find a way to do this beyond just your vascular trainees. And trust me, the general surgery residents, the plastic surgery residents, the other integrated, the cardiac residents, if you have that at your institution, they'll be interested if there's a Department of Surgery wide or skills protected time. And so I tapped into that time. The first 3 sessions of the academic year, then I do training, and then we schedule testing. And when we do the testing, we set it up into 1-hour blocks where then they bring an assist. Usually I ask them to bring one of the med students who's a passive assistant, and then they perform. And in your packet is all of the grading schema and stuff. And I do all the testing then over the course of those 3 2-hour sessions. So again, for me, it's 12 hours a year that I have to set up. I had to teach the skills session people what to set up. They coordinate with WL Gore to get all the patches and the suture. We use a lot of leftover instruments from the OR. Most skills centers have a lot of this set up through their department and through the OR. So I leverage that rather than trying to reinvent something or trying to replicate the course at our own institution. And I'm happy that basically we even created a little certificate and made it a little competitive amongst the trainees that all the graduates from both our general surgery and vascular program since 2018 have been signed off on this thing that allegedly is VSB required. We just haven't implemented it yet. So that's really kind of what I wanted to state, and hope that folks will have some questions about how to do it at their place. This really worked for us because we have Tuesday, 2 hours every week blocked off, accepted by all the faculty in the Department of Surgery. And then the vice chair of education is always looking for volunteer faculty to do sessions. So I just told them every year, put vascular down for every other month, one of the Tuesdays. And so it's honestly, for me, it's 6 days a year, 6 mornings a year that I block off to do fundamentals of vascular surgery. That has made this, if you will, easy infrastructure wise, and I don't have to worry about it.
Thank you, Jason. So a couple of questions. So do you include all the level of trainees at each training session, or you divide them by levels of training?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I let them decide who comes, meaning that if there's if they're want to focus on the second and third years, then I let the vice chair of education, or nominally the education fellows, decide that. I just tell them these are the 6 days over the year. The first 3 in the first half of the year are training sessions. I've noticed that they kind of divide it up early on in the year. A lot of the chief residents and the 3s, 4s, and 5s and come maybe around December. Some of the interns will show up and stuff. Sometimes people show up a couple of times. I also, much like we've done in the sessions where we have the envelopes and you put all their grading sheets and their graphs into a manila envelope, we keep them for the 6 years. I actually have them for all of the graduates, meaning that we keep them in the sim center. Everybody's like when they did it as an intern, when they did it as a third year, and then when they were signed off as a chief resident. But I think you let your local thing, like, don't try to prescribe it too much, because then nobody's going to show up. I would rather have it be open-ended, have as many people show up. You would rather have the problem of too many people coming to suture, and then you as the vascular champion just trying to get a couple of extra faculty to come help. I've asked, like, some of the, sometimes we have a visiting scholar that's there that's helped to be one of the assistants and stuff. Sometimes even some of our vascular seniors come to help the general surgery people. It's been a fun thing for them to do that.
But do you test them once a year? Like you said, 3 months for testing, but it's like each person gets one?
No, just for the senior person that needs to be signed off. So
Okay.
testing, I only spend the time kind of at the end.
Great, thank you, Jason. Next we'll hear from Dr. Aziz and his experience with this.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Jana. Thank you so much, Don, for organizing this great session. So I think in my mind, the value of this is twofold. One is for faculty to know who are the residents who are struggling with the basic tasks, and more importantly, for the residents and trainees themselves to know what they need to work more on. I think, and for residents, it's fun. I think we started with end-to-side anastomosis kind of first thing, and then moving on to patch, and then moving to the clock face model. I think it's fun because they have to struggle with 2 things. One is the precision of stitches, and number 2 is the speed. What I found out initially was that I think residents want to do it, everybody wants to do it, and everybody wants to do it fast. And I just didn't feel it right. So I think what we did was that the junior residents, I think I've let them go off time, just take as much time as possible, first year, second years, and then focus on accuracy. And once done enough accuracy, then comes the role of speed, more of PGY3, PGY4 levels, because I felt like one lesson I learned was that the interns trying to do it and second is trying to do it and trying to do it fast, it just didn't work right. Thank you.
And how often do you guys do it?
That's a good question. So for our vascular surgery, we have every 6 months, we have a day and a half for simulation and cadaver dissection. In addition to that, our general surgery, in coordination with general surgery, Jason was mentioning the advantage of general surgery is that it's every 2 months. It brings a lot of residents in, and that's the good part. The bad part, which is it gets diluted out attention-wise. It's just difficult to organize all the faculty who can watch to make sure that the quality of what we deliver is going okay. So it's every 2 to 3 months in a rough estimate. But I truly enjoy the 6 months better because I feel like we all are there, residents are there, vascular surgery residents are there, and we can go in more details.
So I know you mentioned about struggling, trainees who are struggling. And I know Mel, we spoke about it before offline, like how to use it for those trainees. What is the vision, right? Like should, do you test them more often? Like for people who are really struggling, right? What is the advice how to implement it for those trainees?
Yeah, I mean, so this is going to be your local resources. If you have a place that's accessible to the trainees that they can come and use it, that's ideal. We did not, to be honest with you. And so we would do it periodically, like Faisal just said. But when I have used it 3 times for a trainee who is particularly struggling, and then I just gathered the kits and equipment, gave it to them, said, go home. I want to see 5 of each at the end of the week. And then they would go and do it. And then they would bring me their finished models. And so that's when I started to realize you can actually do a fair amount of assessment just looking at their models and how they are progressing. And so each time I would say it was remarkably successful. Again, it's a specific skill that, they're lacking, and whether, that's suturing in the end to side or the patch, especially, it's easy to watch their progress when they come in and do an AV graft or fistula, at that level. But these were people we identified, second year, even third year, who were just, again, learning how to suture in the OR, which is not where you want to be. And so I can promise you it works very effectively, but you have to give it to them at a place where they can practice at their own speed, at their own time. And, you may not have that at the hospital. So you just have to kind of gather the material and let them take it home.
So I think that's very important what Mel mentioned, that you don't always have to observe the trainees. And I like that idea with these kids. You send them home. You don't have to observe how they suturing, but still can see the final product and be able to see their progress. So that's one thing for everybody to think about. We'll move on to Dr. Paul DeMusto and hear his comments and how he's been using this.
Great, thanks. Again, at the University of Wisconsin, and we'll try to kind of not reiterate what everybody else has said, but we have a little bit different setup than what Jason talked about. We have an integrated residency and fellowship, so including 2 years of research. So we have 9 trainees at any given time, and we have sim time for about 60 to 90 minutes once a month. And so when we initially started rolling this out, I did practice sessions every other month and then did testing at the end of the year. And that was just with the vascular trainees. And I would pair up a senior and a junior person. So a fellow helping the intern, or the 5th year helping the intern, and vice versa. And that turned out to be too much. They lost interest in it. And when they weren't being graded or tested, it's like, what's the point? We're just wasting time. And so what I've moved to is testing twice a year. So we're doing a beginning of the year test and an end of the year test, and they're getting graded on those. We have the materials available. We have a set of materials in our resident room so that they can practice as they want. They also have access to the sim center. And then we have one scheduled practice session in the protected sim time in the middle of the year. That is worked out a little bit better for us, because the time that they're in the sim center and being tested and under the clock, they really do get competitive, and they've all said to me, this makes it feel more worth it. We get faculty down there, which can be a little bit hard to do more than a few times a year, so that they have a faculty observing and grading them. And then we as Dr. Aziz said, the junior residents don't get it done in enough time. I still record their time, but again, I'm not calling it out like, oh, 19 minutes, you got to finish, and so that allows us to see some progress over time, and them to see some progress over time. And so I think that has worked well for us. In terms of the general surgery residents, they have sim time every week, but they do every general surgery thing in there. So the vascular time that we get is only one session, and they really want us to focus on end to side anastomosis, because they're doing fistulas and things like that. And so we've taken the materials and the skills and used it in that setting, and not graded it essentially, but used use the videos and the materials to help them work on end-to-side anastomosis. I do think that, you know, I have had one resident that's struggling, as was mentioned, and they took it to heart. We gave them some materials, like Mal said, to practice with, and I worked with them individually, meeting a couple times, but I didn't observe every time they did it. They had some self awareness and self-investment, and it really allowed them to progress. And so that has worked pretty well for us. I will say we're one of the places, the endo curriculum came up earlier. We were fortunate to get that, and we have that, and I think it's great. The main problem is only one set of trainees can work on it at a time. So when we do our practice sessions, I try to rotate through which trainees are practicing the endo skills and target it more to either the new fellow or the more junior residents, because most of those skills are sort of basic wire catheter skills. But I think the open stuff, people like it. They get competitive. The faculty enjoy coming down. You know, they don't feel like, nobody feels that their time is being wasted, and so that's good. And I will say that Mal's data has really borne out in our program as well. The PGY3 is marginally passing, and the PGY4 and up are fine. And so that's you know, they studied a lot of people, and just in our small sample, we've seen the same thing.
Thank you, Paul. And I think it's important, your comment about like not to overdo it and not to sort of bore the trainees. We want to keep them interested in this whole thing so they keep on using it and advancing their skill. So last but not least is Dr. Silpi. I wanted him to give his comments because, you know, he's a very new APD. I received the box from Gore and I dropped it in his office and I said, good luck with this. Figure this out. He's never been to APDVS, so he hasn't heard any of the spiels about this. So I said, this is the videos. So I thought it would be good to hear his perspective as somebody, you know, in his shoes, like haven't done this, haven't heard it, and how but I think he's been pretty successful integrating to our curriculum. So I want to give him a moment to share his experience.
Thanks, Yana, for the boxes, and thanks to Yana and Dawn for the opportunity. You know, it's been quite the journey over the last 3 months, going from having no clue what's inside the boxes to figuring out how to implement it into the curriculum. I appreciate everyone's perspective and sharing. It's actually really helpful to hear a lot of these perspectives, and I'm going to offer once again a kind of a unique flavor, I think, that has not really been mentioned yet. A little bit closer to Paul's, though, because we do have an integrated residency and fellowship as well. And, you know, although this is geared towards the residents, you know, I do feel like it plays a role for fellows, you know, as well. So when I implemented it, one of the struggles that I had was finding the time, both for the faculty and for the trainees. The vascular integrated residents do have protected time, but only under the auspice of the general surgery skills curriculum. And we never had our own skills or simulation curriculum. And now we're in the process of developing that. And this was really inspired by FVS and the implementation of the initial skills evaluation that has come with it. And so, I mean, kudos to everyone on this, you know, panel, because it really has created quite the culture change in our program to figuring out how to create time for skills, teaching, and evaluation. I have implemented now a once-a-month curriculum driven by self-motivation of the trainees. They are able to come as frequently or infrequently as they want. In a total transparent way, I shared with them the skills objectives as well as the grading rubrics prior to any interventions or, you know, practices or evaluations at all, just so they knew what was expected of them. They could watch the videos ahead of time, they could prepare for what skills they were going to be practicing, and they knew what we were going to be looking at from an evaluator standpoint. And I think this is really important because if the trainees don't know what they're being evaluated for, then they don't really know how to practice in their own time. What I found is having 2 trainees show up for me as an individual at the same time was not helpful, because I think it takes a lot of attention to what's happening in every suture that, you know, in every bite that the trainee takes, whether that be around the clock or in the anastomosis or in the patch. I really had to focus on what was happening in order to grade them what I thought was as fairly and accurately as possible. And I'm hoping as I get more faculty attention, more faculty buy-in, you know, that can take some of the pressure off, where we can start to do, you know, more than one trainee at a time. And so what I would do is a 30 to 40-minute slot. And obviously the fellows and senior trainees would move forward, through this a little faster, and the juniors would move through it a little slower. And I was the assistant because I wanted them to have something that was constant and something that was, appropriate, rather than for them to bring a student or another junior resident with them who may not be able to help them. And then the focus isn't so much on their own skill development, but really, whether or not they can learn how to have someone assist them or not. And that's a completely different thing, I think. And so by having a faculty member system, I thought that was the most appropriate way to actually accurately assess and teach those particular skills. Like I said, we've only had 3 months so far, so it hasn't been too robust of an experience, but the trainees have completely bought into it. I mean, they think that, obviously I've kind of tried to hit home that if they demonstrate that they're successful at these skills, throughout their training career, as they become more and more successful, they'll have more autonomy in the operating room to, perform these skills, with the faculty during real life cases. We have discussed this thoroughly with general surgery, and similar to Paul, the problem with general surgery curriculum is the entire year has already been assigned to general surgery topics. And we have 2 days per year. So they want one open skills day where we can kind of teach these skills, and one endo skills day where we're bringing a lot of endovascular simulators from industry to help them learn some basic wire skills, exchanges, etc. I think this will continue to unfold. Obviously, hopefully we can integrate more and more into the general surgery time slots, so we have more time, more faculty, and more trainees coming into each of these sessions. And I think the last piece of the puzzle for us is going to be, in addition to all these other things, figuring out when to evaluate the trainees, at what point do you evaluate, and how do you measure retention of skills? How often do you need to measure retention of skills, as well as development and progression?
Thank you, Jeff. This is great. Couple of sort of closing remarks. This hour went by really fast. This was very engaging. There was a question about getting this for fellowship. So the reason it was initially sent out to residency programs because Gore generously sponsored this as a grant, and the grant was written for integrated vascular surgery programs. And, we are working on, for us to get more kids, we basically have to extend the grant and work on that, which we are, going to work on. This is why it was initially sent out only to integrate residents. And the value of it for fellows is probably there, but maybe not as much, as Mel mentioned, that, they come with, open surgical skills. But we are discussing it, how to get to fellowships. I'm not sure, Mel, if you have something to add about in terms of getting into fellowships.
No, I put in a QA that I am financially inept, and that has held this back for as long as it has. While FLS makes millions for SAGES, Jason and I have managed to lose money over all of this. So yeah, I think though, I love the fact that people want it. And if you kind of work through your local Gore Rep, the problem, as Yana alluded to, is the grant has to reflect what Gore values these products as, and it is incredibly high. Like it's the Gore material they value incredibly high, and that's one of the reasons why we had to come up with the do-it-yourself thing for the clock face model, because those Gore-Tex sheets are insanely priced, and so that's the real limitation. I want everybody to be able to have it. I will say Gore has been a great partner. If you work through your local Gore rep, he can reach out to Stan Woodson, who's kind of our national person. And if you are still trying and ineffective, like, get the list of stuff from Kristen and reach out to me, and I'll try to work through Gore and get you everything you need as well.
Thank you, Mel. So I hope that this session tonight kind of started the conversation. Everybody should have the kids, and if you don't, please reach out. I am going to put my email in the chat as well. Please reach out. SVS Connect is great, but only Mel usually answers those chats. He loves SVS Connect. But the goal for this year is to sort of start this progressive engagement. Everybody got their kids, and everybody's sort of open to figure out how it fits their program and their curriculum. But I'm hoping, or we all hoping here, that you guys gonna start, and then sometime before APDVS, probably February. So I'm hoping to send out a survey to all the program directors and APDs to get their feedback of what has been done. So we get a little bit more data of how is it going and what we can do. You know, it's been mentioned that there's a goal eventually that this is somehow going to become a requirement for the boards, but we don't have a solid plan on that yet. But we need a feedback from all the program directors to see how it's going before we really make a plan of how it's going to be a requirement, if it's going to be a requirement. There's a lot of still things in progress. So please reach out if you have any issues, questions with supplies or how to integrate it. And I'm hoping, you know, you guys gonna get all interested in this, get this into your programs, get it to your trainees, and we'll get. I'm hoping that the APDVS this coming up, we will have some data to talk about the experiences of all the programs. And I hope that the MELS data on how well it correlates with how the people do and ready to graduate is really convincing. Dr. Coleman, any closing remarks?
I don't think there's anything I can add to this discussion and panel. It's been really super. And just, I have a huge amount of respect and admiration for all of the work that has ensued over so very many years. So congratulations to everybody. Thrilled to see this moving forward, eager to support all of our programs. And I think that's a wrap. Nice work tonight.
Thank you, everybody, and see you soon.
Thanks, John.